Hello, I'm very pleased to be here with William Collins, the author of the book, The Empathy Gap, Male Disadvantages and the Mechanisms of Their Neglect. Now, William Collins is a pseudonym of the retired physicist and engineer Rick Bradford, so I'll call him Rick from now on. He's the man behind the amazing website, The Illustrated Empathy Gap, empathygap.uk. The book was published 2 years ago as in a paperback edition and remains, for many people, including myself, the most impressive book available covering the issues that it does and the gender and ideological issues behind the systemic disadvantaging of men and boys. I'll read out just the first two testimonials from the back cover. The first is from Professor Janice Fiamengo, who we all know and love. This man is a master. I am in awe of his work. Erin Pitsey, again a much-loved woman in the movement, founder of the world's first refuge for domestic violence victims. The Illustrated Empathy Gap is my go-to website for first-class evidence-based research into the 21st century hostility towards the destruction of the family unit and gender-based hostility towards men and boys. Not a day passes without me recommending the book to people. I was proud to publish it 2 years ago through my modest publishing concern, LPS Publishing. The book is as relevant today as the day it was published. In the preface for the new ebook edition, just published, Rick explains that where things have changed, it's invariably been for the worse. The book has been available for 2 years for about £25 from Amazon and other online retailers. Rick makes very little profit from sales, as I think he'll agree. And LPS Publishing makes none because it's a very large book, 675 pages long, and published through print on demand. So when somebody orders a copy anywhere in the world, only one copy is manufactured. Now, it was a very challenging book to format and convert into an ebook edition, but J4MB made the necessary financial and time investment because we believe the book is so important for the men's rights movement internationally. Rick wishes to maximize distribution rather than income for himself. So the ebook is selling for £4.32 on Amazon's UK site and similar sums, equivalent sums in other currencies on all platforms selling ebooks, and it's available to download for all e-readers. People who don't own an e-reader, such as a Kindle, can download free reading apps from Amazon and other companies so they can read the ebook on their computers, tablets, and smartphones. Following this interview, and in the same interview, I'll be explaining why the ebook edition is so amazing, regardless of whether you own an e-reader or not. Rick, finally, a very warm welcome. Before I start, I should like to thank you warmly for sharing most of the profits from the sale of the ebooks, equally between a men's charity you support and J4MB. That's really, really appreciated. I have a few questions for you. Firstly, and this is something that quite a few people have asked me over the years, what first got you interested in men's issues?
Oh my goodness. How far back would you like to go? Actually, if you want to go back and have the full story, you can read it in, and this is typical of me, I'm here to plug my own book and I'm going to plug another book instead. But yeah, my backstory is in the book edited by Neil Linden, Epiphanies. So if you really want the whole thing, then it's there, along with many other people's, which is a much better reason for getting that book, by the way. But in brief, I have been disturbed by the bias that was always very evident to me. But by always, I mean, certainly going back to the early 80s. But like so many other people that were in that position at that sort of time, I thought it was just me, you know, being a grumpy old fart, or a grumpy young fart, as I would have been then. So I did not, and of course I was working full time then, so I didn't have the time to do anything about it at that time. So I was disturbed by what I was reading in the media, and you know, at that time my wife got The Guardian every day, and it was, you know,
you allowed that, Rick?
Am I allowed it? No.
No. You allowed her to take it. That was a bit of a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think she still does read it every day, but at least we don't have it in hard copy anymore. So you know, I didn't read it, but I was inevitably exposed to it like a bad smell, you know. So I could see what sort of stories were being run, and it really irked me because it was so obvious to me, and yet it was unmentionable. I mean, people talk about things you can't say these days. Well, it's been like that sort of all my life, I think, on gender issues. It's not new.
No.
So then suppose fast forward to the early 90s and you got Neil Linden's book coming out in 1992, No More Sex War. And David Thomas's book, Not Guilty, the year after. And that same year, 93, Warren Farrell's Myth of Male Power. So there was that flurry of books, all, you know, with statistics and with some force, you know, presenting a counter argument. So at that point, I realized it wasn't just me, but I still thought this is a minority issue because no one else I knew was talking about it at all. And again, I was still working, so I didn't do anything about it then. And I continued not doing anything about it other than feeling irritated by it until really I was very close to retirement and winding down at work and had more time. And, you know, that's no coincidence, I'm sure. And round about that time, I mean, I've been blogging. I started blogging in 2013. And what finally did it was Diane Abbott.
Yes.
Now, it could have been anyone, actually. I mean, that was just the last straw. Diane Abbott, in the early months of 2013, hit the headlines and was doing lots of interviews because she made some speech about how men were all Jack Daniels swilling, Viagra crunching, commitment phobic, this, that, and the other, you know. So it's the sort of thing that, you know, would get you on the media because that's what they like. And at that time, I was still watching the TV. I've learned better now. I haven't watched TV for years, but I was still watching TV, and I'd see Diane Abbott being interviewed by all sorts of people. And I was sitting there thinking, why don't they challenge her? Why don't they challenge her on this? You know, if it was a male interview, I was thinking, well, who are you talking about? Do you mean me? You're accusing me of being like this? If not me, is it that guy behind the camera? You know, it seems so obvious to challenge it because she wouldn't have been able to name names, and she certainly didn't have sources. I mean, there was no sources or data or anything behind it. It was just sexist garbage. So that I after that, I remember sitting down fuming, and I opened up Word and I wrote, "That's it!" exclamation mark. And then I filled God knows how many pages. I don't know if I've even got that file anymore, but I filled page after page with this vertiginous rant, you know, just a brain dump of 20 years of frustration. And then when I'd done that and calmed down a bit, I thought, well, what do I actually know? You know, what do I actually know about the facts? Is it just me? Am I a misogynist? Have I got all this wrong? You know, so I thought, well, I need to read. I'm a physicist and an engineer, you know, driven by data. So I thought I'll start looking for the data. So that's when I started blogging on a long since defunct site called Red Pill UK. You may remember it, Mike, because I think that's where you first stumbled across my works.
Yes, indeed.
And so, I started researching lots of topics. And for some reason, which I can't recall, I looked at domestic violence in particular. And I'm sure you will recall my 100+ page summary of domestic violence.
The response to Home Office consultation exercise.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that was quite something.
Went to the Home Office, courtesy of J4MB.
And Theresa May, then Home Secretary, of course.
Yes, that's right. And of course, it had a tremendous impact on her and changed the course of history.
Well, it did. It did.
No, it didn't. I don't think there was even an acknowledgement, was there? But yeah, I remember, and it's incredible how naive I was, because I remember when I was doing that research, I was looking at the Home Office sites and the Crown Prosecution Service sites and Ministry of Justice sites. It's the first time I'd got into this. And I was coming across these, strategies for violence against women and girls. It's the first I knew about it. So I started looking at this and I thought, well, this is all a bit one-sided. What about the policy for violence against men and boys? Honestly, I was that naive. I actually looked for such documents.
Right. The good old days when you.
It didn't take me very long to realize I was never going to find anything like that because it wasn't there. But that was the education. So I think it was 2013 when I went very, very steeply up the learning curve from mere irritation to having some knowledge of what was going on. So that was the start.
Fascinating. And there's something else which often surprises people when I tell them about you, that unlike most prominent people in the men's rights movement, you really haven't suffered personal disadvantaging.
No,
I mean, most of us have been through one or two wars that
No.
kind of helped us on the way to taking the red pill. But yours was, result of sort of intellectual curiosity and humanity and empathy and so on.
Yeah, that's right. It is unusual. Perhaps slightly less unusual for women in the movement.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
But virtually all the men have been burnt in some way, and the family courts are the most common way. But also domestic abuse and false accusations are common. So that's the route in for most men. And some women, of course, that's the route in. The family courts are a route in for paternal grandmothers quite commonly.
Yes, indeed.
But yeah, some women come into it sort of rather more like me, that they see what's happening and they can see it's wrong. It's not because they've been personally affected. In fact, some women have been actual victims of domestic abuse, but nevertheless can see that there's a skew in the narrative, despite the fact they could so easily be of the other persuasion. So I'm not unique in coming at it from that point of view.
Sorry, just staying on that, Rick, I guess Deborah Powney being an obvious example of the genre.
Deborah Powney is an example, yeah.
Okay. Rick, why did you decide to write the book, and how long did it take to write?
It took basically a year. At which point, any right-minded person should fall off the chair and say, he's lying. He couldn't write nearly 700 pages in a year with all that research. And that's absolutely true, because, of course, I wrote the book. Well, I started writing the book in May 2018 and had finished in June 2019. So it's just over a year. But by then, I'd been blogging for 5 years. And so the blog acted as a springboard from which the book was written. I mean, I wasn't just cutting and pasting. I was rewriting most of the text, and I was going back over the references and updating the data if it was a few years old and all that. So it wasn't just a cut and paste job. Otherwise, it would have been a month rather than a year. But I'd covered so much ground before that's why I could do it quite quickly. Yeah.
Right.
So why did I write it? Yeah, that's the other part of the question. Well, I was never intending to write a book. And it's all Eric Anderson's fault.
Everything is.
Oh, no, that's unfair. Not everything.
It's Eric's fault.
Yeah, no, well, I can blame you as well, because Eric first got in touch with you, and I think you had a long conversation. And Eric happened to ask whether there was anyone in the movement that was interested in writing an academic style book. And you pointed him at me as perhaps the most appropriate person with an academic skew to my writing. And so he got in contact with me. And although I hadn't been thinking of writing a book, when I learned that Eric was, he was the editor of a series of books with Routledge.
Yes.
I thought,
books on masculinities.
Books on masculinity.
Yeah.
Eric was, I don't know what his title is now, but he was professor of masculinities at Winchester at the time. So I thought, hey, this is an opportunity which I would be culpable for refusing to take, whether I want to do it or not, because this is an opportunity which hasn't reared its head for anyone really previously. No. So I said, okay, I'll have a crack at it. And so what happened then, this is a bit of a saga. I mean, you know what the story is here, but very, very few people do. So it's worth recounting it now. Hopefully it's safe to recount it at this distance in time. But I wrote the first 6 or 7 chapters, which is what you tend to do. And I wrote the sort of book proposal that you write for major publishers, which was about, you know, what's unique about the book, what ground does it cover that other books don't cover, what's the target audience, all this sort of stuff. And Eric helped me with that, of course. And it went in to Routledge for review, which is the normal thing that happens. And after a month or two, the first review came back, which was thumbs up. In fact, glowing, you know. So I thought, bloody hell, this is going to happen, you know. Then it all went quiet for 2-3 months, something like that. I thought, what's going on now? So I got in touch with Eric and said, what's happening? And I think it was literally the next day, or no longer than the couple of days anyway, that after Eric had prodded Routledge and said, what's going on? Suddenly, 3 other reviews came out of the woodwork, all of them slating it, all of them clearly from the predictable ideological slant. Eric was livid, absolutely livid. And he was all for, you know, going in fighting and everything. But I said, look, Eric, it's dead in the water at this point as far as Routledge is concerned.
It's surprising that he was surprised with the benefit of hindsight, but
yeah, well, I mean, he's coming from the fact he was at that time coming out of, in the process of coming out of feminism. So he had not personally experienced at that point, I guess, the sort of rejection that we just take for granted as daily life.
Those reviews or critiques, I'm not quite sure what you call them. What I remember overwhelmingly is that they made the point that, well, this book, it doesn't tie in with existing books about feminism. That's the entire point of it, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, it was a religion, you know, it was heresy, wasn't it?
It's heresy, yeah, it's heresy. That's exactly what it is, and they weren't going to have any of it. Whether it's because their filter meant that they really thought it was a crap book, or whether actually it was more bloody minded and we don't want that narrative getting out. I don't know.
Rick, you and I know it was the second. Come on.
Well, no, I'm not so sure. I'm not. It doesn't make any difference to me. And the functional truth is that at that point I could see it was dead in the water, and there's no point in Eric making his life any more difficult with Routledge, because once the external reviewers have slated a book, the publisher will not publish it, because academic books aren't bought by the public because they were eye-wateringly expensive. They're only bought by university libraries. And if the academic reviewers have slated it, it won't get any sales at all. So there was zero chance of it going ahead.
Yeah, agreed. Rick, I just want to put in at this point, one of the things I absolutely loved about the book was chapter 1, The Differently Gendered Society, because you're very well known for data-driven things. You know, I'm always surprised when you do a piece that doesn't have a graph in it or a table of data or something. And the Differently Gendered Society covers a lot of ground, but I think it's an absolute tour de force. The whole book's a tour de force, but that chapter was very special in sort of placing, you know, the lack of empathy. It's you know, in the context of men's lives, women's lives, feminism. The whole shooting match is I mean, it's about what is it now? 35 pages long, and there's not a wasted sentence in there. It was really quite something.
Yeah, I went over that chapter over and over and over. I think I quote Blaise Pascal, don't I, at the beginning. can't remember the exact words, but basically the thing you put first is the thing you think of last. And that was heartfelt because that chapter underwent so many revisions. Started off quite bland and quite short. And it was the early sections with the whole chapter. And then bit by bit, I thought, well, that's nowhere near what I think. That's nowhere.
The feeling.
And I kept, and yeah, well, you know, when the book was going to go to Routledge, I tried writing it without the word feminism or feminist in the book at all, because that was my strategy to try and get below the radar. It seems naive now, incredibly naive. And even when I started introducing the dreaded F word, I didn't introduce gynocentric or gynocentrism, and for quite a while afterwards, because I think that's going even further down that path. But I thought, you know, fuck it, you know, this is reality, and if people don't like it, fine. I mean, I do emphasize in that opening chapter that unlike the rest, it isn't underwritten by data. It's a theory, it's a hypothesis, and you know, it's up to the rest of the book to justify or not whether that's, you know, that orientation on things is validated by the data.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, I'm personally really frustrated with books, with mass market books, such as The Boy Crisis by Warren Farrell, where the boy crisis has been created. It is very much the creation of feminism and feminists. And yet you will not find feminism or, you know, in the index.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And I mean, there's the only vague criticism was he was surprised that the National Organization for Women didn't seem keen on equal parenting, which is fairly astonishing, again, with the benefit of hindsight. Rick, do you self-identify as a men's rights activist? And an allied question, do you self-identify as an anti-feminist?
When I'm asked direct questions like that, then the answer is yes to both. Well, the MRA label, I used to, my first, well, not my second website was called MRA UK, so that's a bit of a clue. So yeah, I mean, I say I'm an MRA because my views will strongly coincide with the views of other people that call themselves MRAs. So, you know, there'll be in any broad church, there's differences of views, but most of my views will align with most of the views of most other people that call themselves MRAs. So in that sense, I'm an MRA, and I'm happy to be associated with the name on that basis. But I do have a bit, I mean, I don't go around with the label tattooed on my forehead because I don't think it's particularly constructive. Which is one reason why I changed the name of the blog to the Illustrated Empathy Gap. I mean, the content's the same, but it's less confrontational. Some people like to be confrontational, and perhaps confrontation is needed, but it ain't my style. That's all. I mean, it's not. No. It's not. There's a difference of view. It's a difference of style, really. The only other thing I'd say, well, in terms of, I'm not an activist. But I am an advocate, so I can use MRA if A stands for advocate. I also have a bit of a problem with rights, actually. So the label for me is not ideal. I mean, I used to be okay with rights, but the concept is so misused now. It's a poisoned concept, and it's, you know, I think a lot of people are MRAs would agree with the idea that you don't automatically have many rights. You might have some, but not many. And rights really come hand in hand with responsibilities and duty. It's very much a conservative conception, isn't it? Yeah. So I have a slight difficulty with the word rights, but that's only a minor point, really. So, but I'd say yes. If I'm asked the question directly, the honest answer is yes. And in terms of being, what was the question? Am I an anti-feminist? Yeah, I mean, again, the fact is I am, because although I'd prefer anti-feminism rather than feminist, because that way it doesn't sound like an ad hominem attack against an individual. It's the ideology that I very much oppose, because, and the book is quite clear about this, the ideology is behind some of the disadvantages that men suffer, but not all.
No.
Not all, because the broader issue is gynocentrism. Gynocentrism is the real source of male disadvantages, because they predate feminism, of course.
Oh, indeed, yes.
Go back a long, long way. So gynocentrism is enemy number one. Feminism is the product of gynocentrism.
Yes, no, I agree. It's something that Paul Elam is always saying, and his talk at the 2016 conference in London was titled "Gynocentrism is the root of feminism."
Yeah, and that's correct.
And he completely nailed it.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
I've always personally seen calling myself an MRA as a badge of honor, but then I'm more confrontational than you.
You are the confrontational wing, yes, definitely. I'm more of a backroom boy, cowering in the corner.
I'm the provisional wing of the but I do despair of people who eschew the label MRA, because some people are critical of MRAs. I thought on that basis. Anyway, that's
whatever label you pick, if you have these views, it will quickly become toxic, because they will make it so.
Exactly.
So it doesn't. Exactly. You can't escape that, I'm afraid.
No, I agree.
You've got to take that on the chin.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Rick. Rick, you've done a great deal of research and writing over the last 8 years. What were you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, that's a bloody good question. Well, I think I've already explained what my initial motivation was. It was to convince myself by taking the empirical route and seeing what the evidence was, really, because I didn't know to begin with. I only had suspicions. But of course, it's the proverbial stone turning. You turn over one stone, you get creepy crawlers.
Yes.
You think, turn over another one, you get creepy crawlers, and already you have a hypothesis developing. And I found that all the stones are creepy crawlers, and even to this day, I turn over new ones. So that was the original purpose. It was really sort of personal. In fact, it's sort of mad, really. My first Red Pill UK blog, I didn't really expect anyone to read it. I was writing it for myself. I was writing it almost like a diary. And I was a bit shocked when you discovered it, to be honest.
Oh, really?
I almost said, what are you doing reading my material?
Go away.
It's insane, because you're sitting here in the privacy of your own room, on your own. It is just like writing something private, but then it goes out and anyone in the world can read it. So that was a bit of a shock. But then, at some point, obviously, it morphed into, I knew I was communicating with people. And when I discovered WordPress and people could actually leave comments, so there was a two-way communication.
The rest is history.
It became obvious that there was an audience. So then I became more aware that there was an audience there. But my motive then was to give readers the same material that I'd been after myself. So it remained a data-driven thing, and still is, really. I occasionally will have an opinion piece where I go off on one, but it's mostly still data-driven.
Right. Sorry, I had a thought which has just escaped me. Oh yes, well, I think one of the problems with feminism is that it is on such a scale. It is the elephant in the room, isn't it? And in an email exchange the other day with Janice Fiamengo, she said, "How do people not get that feminism or feminists have corrupted every major organization across the Western world? How does you wouldn't know that by reading the mainstream media, would you?"
She doesn't pull her punches, Janice, does she?
She doesn't, but she's absolutely right. Here we have our military doing the most ridiculous things.
Yeah.
So I saw the other day that the RAF is going to, rather than have their pilots fly planes, they're going to do it all in simulators. So if we have a virtual war, we're really going to kick ass. If the Ruskies or the Chinese get into their planes, we're screwed, basically. So I expect half of our pilots are going to be off on maternity leave at any given point. Anyway, that's sorry.
Well, I agree that it's sort of, it is mind-blowing the way people can't see it, but there's none so blind as them that will not see.
Indeed.
That's part of it. And partly, this is going back to something we touched on earlier, partly they can't see it, you know, Mike. It's with some people it will be willful and bloody minded and wicked. But I think, you know, with the most people, they just can't see it. For one thing, most people are completely ignorant. I mean, profoundly ignorant about things we take for granted now. And we can't bring ourselves to repeat for the billionth time, but
no.
They still don't, most people still don't know the facts, the basic facts. But it's worse than that, because even when you try to explain basic facts, and even if you can get them to sort of grudgingly believe it, the real killer is they don't care. They don't care. That's the empathy gap. And if they don't care, then how are you going to make progress?
No, you're quite right. I was called only today by one of our best supporters, a very loyal supporter, generous one as well. And he's got a couple of sons at a school near London. And they have, it's about 50-50 boys and girls at this school. It's highly selective. And he says it probably takes its pupils from the top decile. And you could say then, well, if it's 50-50 boys and girls, there's already some preferencing for girls in that number on the basis of IQ at least, but that's another argument. But what had really got his goat was, well, there's a male headmaster who calls himself a feminist. So we're kind of in the Eton headmaster territory here already. He's appointed an American woman who has a degree in civil rights to run the equality and diversity and inclusion unit at the school. And he did some quick analysis where there's, I think, probably guessing something like 80 or 90 different prizes, not that are awarded for everything from Latin to sports to you name it. You know, there's awards for it. Over 60% of the awards go to the girls. But the headmaster's always banging on about what a problem sexism and racism are. But and he's swearing blind that this is all on merit, that it's 60%. So it took me. I sent him a copy of your book this afternoon because I said you need to read chapter 2 on education. And that 60-40 split, that is what I would expect in that situation. And it's right there with the replacement of O levels by GCSEs in 87, 88, which of all the graphs you've ever put out, that you know, that to me is the most memorable. That there was no gender gap in education, but as soon as that came in, and continuous assessment formed part of the grading, well, the inevitable happened, and teachers' bias meant that, you know, girls did better than boys, and that's been with us to this day.
It certainly looks that way from that graph, yeah. But I think what we've got now is it's got worse because there's other forces at play now, which mean that girls genuinely do better even in tests, and then there's bias on top of that. So it's you see, these things can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's actually, you know, there are actually experiments on that. Testing out, you know, if you give one group an impression that they're going to do badly on this test, and another group the impression that, you know, they'll do well. It's, you know, you can see that in the results, even though you've made sure they're absolutely even groups.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, I mean, if 95% of students were female, that would not be considered a problem.
No.
But by the political classes anyway. Okay, I come to the final question, Rick. In the preface to the ebook, you explain it's not an update of the paperback. Are you going to produce an update at some point, and if so, when?
Oh, if I live to 150, I'll consider
You'll start it then.
No, it would be a lot of work to update it. I would think it would take me a good deal more than a year to update it. So that's why I haven't done it for this ebook edition. And I don't think I'd even consider it before let's say 2028, because that would then feasibly be in time for 10th anniversary of publication. But
okay,
I'm not hankering after updating it. Maybe somebody else can do it.
So somebody who has a year, somebody's got a year.
Somebody's got a year to spare.
But it hasn't aged, Rick, at all. I mean, that's one of the great things about it, because what's true today in terms of your arguments, and it's going to be true in 5 years and 10 years.
Yeah, it will, but the data will be gradually look more and more out of date inevitably. I mean, most of the data sets in there are new ones coming out annually, if not more often. So there are things that you could update. And I mentioned in the preface, there's a lot of things happened in the last year or 2 years that really I couldn't in all conscience omit. So, what's happened with the Domestic Abuse Act, as it now is, for example, and the MOJ's so-called harm report and all that stuff, it would something on that would have to go in. And there's a lot of other things like that would have to go in. And in another 8 years, it's going to be a lot of that. So, yeah, I think it'll have to be twice as big.
Indeed, my God. I mean, if Postman can get it through the letterbox, it's going to kill cats and dogs who are sleeping. I'd just like to add, I'm very much looking forward in the coming weeks, Rick, to interviewing 3 Conservative MPs with you. And as you know, until the last year or two, there was only one elected politician in the English-speaking world who ever spoke on behalf of men and boys, and that was the estimable Philip Davis. Who's just the most extraordinary man. But he's been joined since then by 3 others, Lee Anderson, Ben Bradley, and now Henry Smith.
Yeah.
There's a new all-party parliamentary group on issues affecting men and boys. So, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind what's it called? The Overton window is moving quite nicely in our direction at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. The trajectory is in the right direction, and it's not only. I mean, those are the things I would cite that you just mentioned. 3 MPs at ICMI 21, and a previous shadow minister as well, making 4, you could claim. And
the lovely Anne Widdicombe.
Yeah, exactly, and the APPG, of course, which is a real major coup, I think. But there's other things as well.
Just for the viewers, all the MPs on that, I think I'm right in saying, are Conservative MPs.
Are they
on the APP? I think I'm right in saying that.
No, I don't think they can be.
There's no Labour. There's no Labour MPs on it anyway. That's. I think there might be 1 or 2 Lib Dems and others, but
yes,
no Labour MPs.
The Lords contingent have put in the Labour, because for an APPG you have to have members from certainly both major parties and probably the Lib Dems as well.
Yes, no, it is the peers. You're quite right.
Yeah, so you have to have them there, but it'll be the peers that'll be the other parties.
One of the peers is a Conservative peer, my nemesis, Helena Morrissey.
Oh right.
And what in God's name that god awful woman is doing on the thing, other than sort of spying on what these people are doing? If people don't know, she's the woman behind the 30% Club, that lied through its teeth relentlessly about gave the impression that appointing more women to boards leads to improved financial performance. It's as laughable as saying that adding female football players to the England team would but anyway, that's.
I'm sure she understands the difference between correlation and causality.
I'm sure she does.
I'm sure she does know that. Yeah.
But
she is quite bright.
She is, but not one journalist in the mainstream media has been prepared to report that.
Well, they won't.
The causal link. No. And that's one of my obsessions, Rick, as you know. If ever you want me to write a chapter in a revised book on women in the boardroom, I'll happily do it.
Yeah, there are so many other topics you could add. So maybe it have to be 3 times as big,
Okay. Well, Rick, it's been a huge pleasure and an honor to interview you. You know, I'm the biggest fan of your work. Thank you for your support with regards to previous ICMIs and this one. I think it's a wrap.
Excellent.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Rick Bradford, William Collins. And in this final section of the video, I'll take you through the amazing functionality of the ebook edition, which costs less than a fifth of the cost of the paperback. Now, I remind you that you don't need an e-reader to read it. I'll be using the screen share functionality on Zoom to take you through how this ebook looks on my computer screen, and also how it looks on tablets, smartphones, and Kindles. You can read the book on your computer and other devices with free-to-download software from all the major ebook retailers, including Amazon. The software for reading Kindle books on your computer is very impressive, although I haven't used software from the other companies. I'll start with a page on the Empathy Gap on Amazon's UK page for both the paperback and the ebook, costing £23.31. It was £25 yesterday. Amazon dictate that, and £4.32 for the Kindle, the Amazon ebook edition. On Amazon's US website, it's retailing for $5.99. Now, if I click on the book cover, it'll launch the Look Inside functionality. So we're given a sample of the book, a substantial sample in this case, taking in the preface and the first two chapters, which should be more than enough to give you a very good flavor of the book. You might be interested to see that on the UK website, the book has received 19 ratings and 100% 5-star ratings. So this is what you'll see in the Look Inside functionality, starting with the cover page. And we put the testimonials first, and I'm particularly grateful for one from Professor Janice Fiamengo. This man is a master. I am in awe of his work. Very nice coming from Janice. Now, hyperlinks, one of the great things about ebooks, one of the great things you can include in them is hyperlinks. And the first hyperlink in the book happens to go to LPS Publishing. So my very modest publishing concern, through which I published this book in paperback and ebook. So I'll shamelessly click on that. And you'll notice, so that's the home page, and you'll notice, first of all, that it opens in a new tab. Now, no matter how many tabs you open, it will open a new tab and a separate one for each, which is very useful functionality on its own. So going back to the Look Inside version, the author, so Rick included a table of contents. In this version, you can't click on them to get to the sections, but you'll be able to in the ebook editions, regardless of what device you read them on. So, so we come to the preface, I should say. And on the second page, the awful Jess Phillips MP, the Labour MP who tried but thankfully failed to stop Philip Davis MP, hosting the first ever debate commemorating International Men's Day in the House of Commons. There's the gruesome woman and the estimable Philip Davis, who has spoken at 3 international conferences on men's issues, by the way. And we have 3 more Conservative MPs speaking at the next conference, the virtual conference in November, ICMI 21.icmi.info. So going back to Look Inside. And you might be interested to see that there's a little indicator here for exactly how much of the sample you've read through at that point. And as I say, there's a lot of material viewable for free on the Amazon website. So I turn now to how the book will look on an Amazon previewer, also available for free. And it may be mentioning at this point that anyone can self-publish books and ebooks on Amazon at no cost and update files quickly, again, at no cost. I'll show you the file I reviewed before the ebook's final publication, opening it at the preface. So here we are at the start of the preface, and first of all, I'll just show you how you can change the font size, both in this software, but you'll also be able to do it on all devices, on your computer, and so on. So it's currently font size 3 out of 9. I'll change it to 1, to 5, and back to 3. This is currently in tablet presentation. I'll speak about the smartphone presentation and the Kindle e-reader shortly. But in some of them, you have an alternative of a portrait orientation like this, or landscape, but I'll take it back to the portrait. Now there are a huge number of tables and figures in the book, and I'll take you now to one of the figures to illustrate a couple of points. Firstly, Rick and I decided it was important to keep the captions visible along with the tables and figures. So this is just an example. And figures and tables will always start at the top of a new page. So if I go back a page, you'll see there's this space. But it takes just a moment to get back and sometimes it'll be a new chapter following a space, sometimes it'll be a figure or a table, but it only takes a moment to go forward, and most devices will have touch screens anyway. And this now this graph is an example of where there's colored content. In this case, there's a line relating to girls in education, and a red line, and a blue line relating to boys in education. It'll certainly be colored on your computer screen. This is the tablet version. Again, most tablets will show its color. The same on a smartphone. It works very well on a smartphone, by the way, this book. Very, very useful. And if you buy, let's say, the Kindle version, you don't have to buy versions for all these things. You simply buy one version and they're viewable on all your devices. But on the Kindle e-readers, I think all or almost all are mono. So this is what you'd see. And obviously it's a bit more difficult to distinguish between the line relating to girls and the line relating to boys. But in most of the figures, it's actually quite straightforward. But there will be some that you'll need to go to a computer or another color screen to see. So I'll just go back to the tablet view. I come on now to the issue of how do you get around such a large book as this, and I'll do it in tablet mode. But it's much the same on other devices and computers. You could always do a keyword search, or you could use one or both of the contents tables, the index, or the references section. So I'll start with the author's contents table and click on chapter 2, specifically section 2.2. And you'll see there the last hyperlink on the page, an academic paper from Voya and Voya. So I'll click on that. And there it is in a new tab. You could also use the ebook's own table of contents functionality. Now, one of the great things about this is that you can expand and collapse things. So you could expand all these chapters to show the content. Collapse all. You could expand individual chapters. So here's chapter 2, section 2.2. And there we are back at Voya and Voya again, which we could click, but there's not much point. It'll take you to the paper. I turn now to the references section, an alphabetical list of the hyperlinks in the book. I happen to know where Voya and Voya is located. So there we are. If I click on this link, I would go to the paper that I showed you before. And I turn now to the index. Now, an index is a very rare thing in an ebook, but this book really benefits from it. And I know it took Rick a lot of time and effort to construct it. So if we look at the first hyperlink the first link at the top of the second page, the APA psychological practice with boys and men empirically refuted, you'll see that it's to be found in section 17.51. And that's the section within this book. So if I click on that, there we go. So there you have it, my guide to the ebook edition of what I consider the most impressive book ever published by someone in the men's rights movement. Whether or not you agree with my assessment, I hope you'll agree that at the very least, the ebook edition in particular represents stunning value for money. I hope you'll order a copy, and don't forget most of any profits the ebook makes will be split between a men's charity and J4MB. I really hope you enjoy the book as much as I did. It's a book I turn to on an almost daily basis in the course of my work. Bye for now.